Hello, my friends. This is Paul, and welcome to another episode of Common Touch of Fantasy. And this is the final video for the best of 2015. These are books 5 through number 1. And while I grabbed these books off the shelf, I was just overwhelmed by how much I really enjoyed these books. And I don't think I could pick a better top 5. I just love every one of these books so much. But they do have to go in some order. So the number 5 book of 2015 that I read was The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Fantastic book. This was a challenge for me. A classical literature book, translated Russian lit. It was a challenge for me. There's a lot of philosophy. There's a lot of religious things in this book. And this really challenged me to be a better reader. The writing and prose was fantastic. I am so impressed by how well this book was written that after I read this book and while I was reading this book, I realized how badly other books were written when compared to this book. Dostoevsky does things with characters that even newer authors really don't do. These characterizations are so deep, personal, and have a lot of meaning and theme behind them. They stand for things, they're metaphors of something else, and I just found that to be fantastic. And I put it in my top 5 mainly because I feel like I can read anything now. Like, I'm not intimidated by any book anymore because I've read this. Like, this was challenging for me, but I did it, and because I was able to do it, I can now read anything. So that's why this was number 5 on my list. Number 4 was Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. Now, I originally got this from the library, and then I picked up my own copy of this a couple months ago, actually, during a sale. Now, when I first read this, I liked it a lot. I give it a 4 out of 5. I thought the way that art was representative in this book as something that transcends conflict, that transcends the post-apocalyptic world was fantastic. I thought that the connections between all the characters was something that was so fresh that I really enjoyed it. It was just fantastic to see how all these characters connected together. But then after I read this, I couldn't stop thinking about this. Every month after I read this, I thought about this all the time. Like at least once a week, I've thought about Station 11 and what it meant to me. And as I kept thinking about this book just got better and better. And now I give it I changed my score from a 4 to a 5 a couple months ago. And it's in my top 5 books of the year. And it says a lot that a book can do this for me, because usually if I change a score, it's going to be to lower the score. But this is the only book of the year that actually changed my score to be a higher score than what I originally set it to. And I think the main reason why is because there's so much hope in this book. And the connections between the people give this hope to all these survivors of this post-apocalyptic world. And that meaning, that theme, really stayed with me. And it's something that I think about all the time. And I really like that about this book. It's definitely something that I will be rereading in the future. In fact, all of these books deserve rereads in the future. But mostly this one. This one is definitely a reread for me. I think I can reread this and get even more out of it. And it could be one of my favorite books of all time. It's just a great book. Number 3 was a book I read earlier in 2015, and that was Revelation Space by Alastair Reynolds. And when I read this, I was so impressed with this book, and I'm still impressed with this book. Why? It's because Alastair Reynolds is this scientist, astrophysicist, turned author, and he brings so much knowledge and so much imagination to science fiction that it just blew me away. Like, the depth of this book is compared to a lot of fantasy books I read. And I find that with science fiction that the depth of the plot and the setting in the world to be less than a lot of the fantasy books I read, but not so with this book, with Revelation Space. It was so interesting to me. I found it to be so fascinating. And even though it's a book that's about 560 pages, um, it has so much content in it that it feels like a 1,000-page epic book. And I am so excited about reading Alice Reynolds in 2016. It's probably the thing I'm most excited for as far as reading, because I loved this book so much, and I want to read more of his books because I love his writing style. His writing style is very detailed, scientific, but at the same time, very wrapped up in plot and history and world building, and I just found it to be fantastic. And I can't highly recommend this science fiction book enough. If you're a person that enjoys epic fantasy, I think this is something that you would enjoy, because to me, this is epic sci-fi. Number 2 is a Malazan book, and one that I read only maybe 2 months ago, and that is Steven Erikson's Midnight Tides. Now, this book started off slow. It took me 200 pages to really get into it, to really know what's happening, to connect to the characters, to know what the characters are doing. But once I got into it, I just absolutely fell in love with this book. There are so many characters on different factions, all trying to do what they think is the right thing. But then there's all these gods trying to interfere with these mortals. And I just fell in love with this book because every sentence, every scene pointed towards this one final scene at the end of the book. And the last 200 pages of this book, I was just floored at how many amazing things were happening and how the choices that all these characters made really impacted what happened in the end. And that, to me, is a successful epic fantasy book where the choices that a character makes really impacts what happens to the world and how it changes the world. Because of that, this is my second favorite book of the year, and Malazan is my second favorite series of the year. I read 5 books so far, and I'm hoping to read the 5 later books in 2016. And drum roll, please. My favorite book of 2015 was Mad Ship by Robin Hobb. The Live Ship Trader series was something special to me this year. Not only was it my favorite trilogy, but I got to read it with a group of booktubers that I really like, and I had so much fun talking to them about these books and just discussing these books, and I will always thank them. So like Michael, Samantha, Mercedes, Caitlin, thank you so much for making my reading of these books so special this past year. But Mad Ship takes the Live Ship Trader series and just makes it so good. This is the second book, and the first book had a lot of setup and he had a lot of questions, and I really loved the first book. It was one of my top 20 books. But then the second book just took everything you thought you knew about these characters and about this world and turned it upside down. And the world building was fantastic. Like the questions that were asked in the first book were answered in the second book, and even more so in the third book. But the second book just answered so many questions, and I was just blown away by the answers to those questions. And we have these scenes with these characters that I've now fallen in love with from the first book now into the second book. And these scenes are just so nail-biting. And I love the scenes that are in this book. It is one of the few perfect books of 2015 for me. I gave it a perfect score, a perfect 25 out of 25 with my little rating system. And I just loved it so much. Midnight Tides also got a perfect score. But those were the only 2 all year. And I think about this one scene near the end of the book, and I still get goosebumps about it. It was such a fantastic scene and gave us so many answers, and it was just fantastic. I love this book. Robin Hobb's characterization is fantastic. If I had to choose an author closest to the writing of Dostoevsky as far as characterization, I would pick Robin Hobb. That's how good her characterization is, and I'm just floored by how good this book was. I loved it so much. All right, guys. Thank you for watching all of these videos. I realize that they were longer than a lot of people's top books of the year were, but I wanted to really talk about the books a little bit more than just showing them and just getting some like generic response from it. So that's why I wanted to make longer videos and really stretch it out as well, because this was important to me. These books, these top 20 books, were important to me, and they really shaped 2015 for me. Thank you everyone that has watched me in this last year, and I hope that you guys stick around for 2016.